So, the 7-step goal setting process. Number 1, decide exactly what you want. Be specific. This is really important. I love this. Decide exactly what you want and be specific. It has to be so clear a child could understand it. Second of all, write it down and make it measurable. A goal that is not in writing is not a goal at all. In fact, if you were just to do number 1, number 2, and number 3, set a deadline. And set sub-deadlines if necessary. Basic rule is that there are no unrealistic goals, there are merely unrealistic timelines, unrealistic deadlines. So if you set a goal and you don't achieve it by the deadline, what do? Set another deadline. Just move it back. Obviously, you misjudged. Remember, it's just a guesstimate of when you can achieve the goal. However, with a deadline, half the time you'll achieve it before the deadline. Always when I write down a goal, which I do every day, I say I achieved this goal by this date. So in other words, it's achieved anywhere between now and then. I don't say at the date, but by this date or before this date. But by is my favorite word. I achieve it by June 30th, 2011. I achieve it by December 31st, 2011. Achieve this goal by. And if all you did was this, decide what you want, write it down, and set a deadline, it will change your life forever. I've had people who've just staggered at the difference it made in their lives to write these goals down and just set a deadline on them. But that's not enough. Number 4 is to determine the obstacles that you'll have to overcome to achieve the goal. Remember, the question that we ask is, why aren't you already at the goal? If you want to earn twice as much, why aren't you already earning twice as much? What's the reason? What's holding you back? What's the constraint or the obstacle that's stopping you? Now, in 80% of cases, the 80-20 rule applies here. In 80% of cases, the obstacles between you and your goals are inside you. They're internal. They're not on the outside. So the mark of the superior person when they have a problem is they always say, what is it in me that's holding me back? What is it in me that's holding me back? Is it a lack of discipline, lack of time management, lack of a skill, lack of the ability to perform a particular area? What is it in me that's holding me back? And when you start with yourself, 80% of the time you'll say, well, this is my great problem. I have a book called Eat That Frog, which goes 21 great ways to stop procrastinating and get things done faster. It's based on 30 years of research into time management condensed into a little book. How many people have read that book? It's a good book? It's a life, it transforms people's lives because the number one obstacle in many cases is procrastination, and it shows you how to develop the habit of getting on with it and starting your most important task and just getting it done. And when you get into the habit of determining your most important task and then just doing it, your whole life explodes. Because after that, you start to get everything done. And you start to get more and more done. And not only that, you feel happy. As you do important tasks, you feel happy, your self-esteem goes up, you have more energy, your self-confidence goes up, you're motivated to do more things. So one little problem, procrastinating. People say, well, it's procrastination is what holds me back. It's taking the first step. Well, if you can overcome that, which is a learnable skill, you learn to procrastinate, by the way, by default. So what you do is you say, well, I'm going to overcome procrastination. And don't say I'm going to do it tomorrow or next week. I'm going to take a year, and by the end of the year, I'm going to be one of the best time managers and result getters in the world. Just give yourself a year and work on it every day. And I can promise you, 3, 6, 9, 12 months from now, you're going to be a production powerhouse. You're going to be the most productive person in your industry. You're going to be getting so much done that people will just come around with cameras just to photograph you working. So determine the obstacles. Now, next is determine the additional knowledge and skills that you will require. And remember, to achieve a goal that you've never achieved before, you will have to develop skills that you've never had before. You'll have to do things that you've never done before. So what are they? And here's the great breakthrough thought that changed my life at the age of 23, is that all business skills are learnable. You can learn any skill you need to learn, whether it's prospecting, presenting, closing, hiring, borrowing money, building businesses, marketing. You can learn any skill you need to learn. They're all just learnable skills. They're just laying there. Now, can you learn them in a week or a month? Not unless you're, a quick buck seeker. But can you learn them? Yes, you can learn anything. Can you learn to type? Yes, but not in one lesson. You have to type, and Mavis says, type 30 minutes every day. Take one lesson a day for 30 minutes every day. So I did. And in 90 days, you're touch typing, and your whole world of access to all the information in the world has changed. I've now written 52 books. People say, how can you write so many books? Well, I have a method of writing books, but if I couldn't type, I wouldn't be able to write 52 books. I've sold maybe 10 million copies in 56 countries and 38 languages. Imagine that, a poor boy from the sticks. So I just grew up on the farm, because I've never been near a farm. But the point is that you can learn this stuff. And determine, especially here's the question, ask yourself, what one skill, if I was absolutely excellent at it, would help me the most to achieve my goal? What one skill? And this is one of the greatest questions of all. This is the life changer for me. What one skill? What one skill? Imagine we could wave a magic wand. And in 24 hours, you would be absolutely excellent at any one skill in your entire world. I bought my magic wand, by the way, here it is. And if you can imagine you could take a magic pill or wave a magic wand or buy a hypnotic program and play it all night, and the next morning you'd wake up and you'd be absolutely excellent at any one skill. What one skill would have the greatest positive impact on your life? What one skill would help you the most to achieve your most important goals? Now, if you don't know the answer to this question, you have to find it out. You have to find it out, because the lack of this skill is holding you back more than anything else. Here's a discovery, and this discovery, again, 10 years of research by the head of Martin Marietta Corporation. What he found was that your weakest key skill sets the height on your success. Your weakest key skill determines the height of your income. It determines the height of your success in your career. It determines the speed at which you move ahead. If you have a whole bunch of skills, but you have one key skill where you're really poor, that skill holds everything back. It's almost like the whole team runs forward when they have the snap the ball, and if the quarterback is running back, and the people are all over him, the rest of the team's running out there, and the quarterback gets sacked 20 yards back, where does the line of scrimmage go? All the way back to where the quarterback was sacked. My point is, your weakest skill sets the height of your success. So you have to ask the question, what one skill would help me? And the answer to that is your weakest skill. It's always the skill that's holding you back. And the wonderful thing is that all skills are what? They are learnable. That means that you can learn the skill. Imagine if you can go to a skill store and say, you know, I'm tired of being poor at prospecting. I think I'll go and buy the skill. I'll take that, the premium prospecting skill there, please. Take it, pop a pill, and now you're a superb prospector for the rest of your sales career. Would that help you at all? Of course. What I'm saying is skills are learnable. They're laying there. Just bend over, pick them up, and say, by gum, I'm going to become good at prospecting. I've worked with people who have identified a skill, and it may have taken them 6 months or a year to master the skill and transform their lives completely, tripled their income, literally shot them to the top of their businesses, changed their whole situation in life for themselves and their family with one additional skill. And sometimes you're only one skill away from doubling your income. Sometimes you're only one skill away from doubling your income. And when you ask yourself, what one skill would help me the most? That's probably the answer. If you were absolutely excellent at that one skill that you could identify, you could probably double and triple your income. Isn't that true? Say yes. Yeah. And so it's a learnable skill. Now, whenever we identify this skill, we find it's also a skill you don't particularly like. It's one you're not very comfortable with. Because of why? Fear of failure, fear of criticism, fear of rejection, fear of not doing it well, fear of embarrassment, fear of ridicule, fear of loss of respect of other people, and so on. So there's always a skill that we don't like. But why is it that we are uncomfortable in any skill area? Why is it that we are uncomfortable in any skill area? Because we're not good at it yet. Exactly. You've been here before. And that's what it is. We're not good at it yet. So there's just a matter of time. Everybody who is good at any skill was once poor. Everybody who's in the top 10% started in the bottom 10%. Everybody who's at the front of the line of life started where? At the back of the line. And what hundreds of thousands and millions of people can do, 10.6 million self-made millionaires in America, as of yesterday in the newspaper, all started with nothing, and they're all millionaires, multimillionaires, centimillionaires, 500 millionaires and billionaires and multi-billionaires. And they started with zero, zip, nada, nichts, rien. And they're no smarter than you. One of the great experiences of life is to run into a multimillionaire and find they're as dull as ditch water. And as dumb and they're not, as they say, not the sharpest knife in the drawer. I mean, they're just average people, just average folk. We had some people in our seminar recently, and this guy's not dumb. He's just really nice guy. He's an average guy. And what he did is he started to go through my programs when he was driving a truck in New Zealand. We had a distributor showing our programs on video. He's driving a truck in New Zealand, and he set a goal to double his income, and he realized the only way he could double his income is if he owned his own truck. So he set a goal to save up enough money to buy his own truck, and he had to get married with kids. He had to really work hard to do that, but he finally bought his own truck, and now he could market himself, sell himself as an independent truck driver, and earn twice as much as driving somebody else's truck. But he took the twice as much as he was earning and saved it and bought a second truck. Jump ahead 11 years. This truck driver with a high school education has 350 trucks and 1,000 employees. He's one of the richest men in New Zealand and one of the most respected people in the country. And he brought himself and 10 of his staff to our seminar last year. He said, so changed his life. It was so profound, is that clarity of the one goal. If I want to double my income, I've got to have my own truck. And that was a starting point. And getting his own truck was not as hard as he thought. And so he got 2 trucks, and then 3 trucks, and now he dominates shipping throughout New Zealand. And remember, my guys will tell you, he's just the nicest guy, just an average guy. You sit next to him, you'd think maybe he drove a truck. And you're right, he did. Determine the people. Number 6, determine the people whose help and cooperation you will require. Who are they? Whose help and cooperation you will require. And then assemble all these details into a plan, organize the plan, and get started. Now, a plan is merely a list. It's a list of everything that you can think of that you could possibly do to achieve the goal. And then you organize the list by priority, what should you do first, and sequence, what should you do second. I had a gentleman in my course in Sydney, Australia, and he had started off a business when he was about 20, 21. He worked his head off for 7 or 8 years. He's now 28, 29. He had a very successful business. But now he realized his whole childhood was gone. All of his friends had gone off and traveled around the world and so on. And he wanted to travel. I mean, he wanted to go to Europe, and he wanted to visit Paris. And he had a good business. He'd been trying to sell his business for 2 years. And I said to him, he said, tell me, what can I do? How can I sell my business? I said, well, have you ever read a book on how to sell a business? He said, are there books on this subject? I said, of course, there's thousands and thousands of businesses that are sold every year, and there's experts who help people buy and sell business, and they've written books on it. As a matter of fact, any bookstore has a section in the business section on small businesses, and one of the subjects is how to buy or sell a business. He had no idea. So what was the number one thing he needed to do if he wanted to sell his business? Find out how to do it. Oh boy, that's deep. You know, he had no idea how to sell a business. So at the break, Cam was there. At the break, where's Cam? Where's Cam? Is Cam here? All right. Well, at the break, oh, there it is. So at the break, what he did is he went down the street to the bookstore. It's called Dymocks. It's like the Barnes & Noble of Australia. And he went to the section. There's about 15 books on how to buy and sell books. He bought 2 or 3 of them, took them home, read them through, figured out how he had to present his business, how to put together a plan, structure, how he had it priced, it valued, how he could use business brokers. Within about 6 months, he sold his business for about $2.5 million. He spent the next 5 years traveling. And then came back, started a new business. I mean, and he said, but number one in the plan is find out how to do it. It's astonishing how many people want to do something, and they don't do step 1, is find out how. It's like saying, I'd love to be able to make a great Caesar salad. Well, what's the first thing you do? You go and get a what? A recipe, that's right. Wow, that's deep. Okay. So you assemble all the details in a plan, and you decide what's the first thing I need to do? What's the second thing I need to do? What can I do at the same time I'm doing something else? Priorities and sequence. And then the goal-setting exercise, now, I'm going to ask you to start to write these answers down. So please get your pen ready. This is really, really important. This is kind of the jelly in the jelly donut of this seminar. So please begin writing. What are your 3 most important goals in life right now? You have 30 seconds. Write quickly. 30 seconds. 29, 28, 27, 26, 25. Write fast. "15 seconds. Write quickly. If you can't think of anything, write money, money, money. 10 seconds. 5 seconds. 4 seconds. 3, 2, 1. Stop. Now, this is a very important exercise. It's called the quick list method. What we have found is that when you only have 30 seconds to write down a goal, your answers will be as accurate as if you had 30 minutes or 3 hours. And I've had people come up to me after this and they say, all this time I thought my goals were loving and hugging and helping the world and world peace and world hunger and everything else. When I only had 30 seconds, I just wrote down money, money, money. I realized I've been fooling myself. I've been living in a world of fantasy. What I'm really concerned about is the fact that I just don't have enough money and I'm not earning enough. And I thought my concern was helping the world. I want to help the world. You notice it's always poor people that want to help the world with somebody else's money. Rich people are busy doing it. The Bill Gates and the Warren Buffetts are busy doing it with their money. The poor people want your money to help save the world. So whatever your 3 goals that you wrote down there, 2 things. First of all, those are your biggest concerns in life. Second of all, they're eminently achievable. They were a little bit general, but it's interesting with your 3 goals. Take an example here. Is imagine that you are, that your goals will show you 3 things. This is like a coin. Is your goals are your present. These are your goals today, but they also show you your past, because your goals will indicate the major problems in your life that you need to solve. And the 3 goals, by the way, I can guess in 80% of cases will be a financial goal, a relationship goal, and a health goal. How do I do? Pretty good, huh? Say yes, come on. Because those are the 3 most important parts of life. And if you had goals other than those 3, then we've arranged to get you some psychological counseling later. But you write down those goals and they also tell you your future. So when you write down your 3 most important goals in life, they tell you in 30 seconds a snapshot of your past, present, and future. Where you're coming from, which is those are the goals, those are the problems in your life, where you are today, and what you need to accomplish, which will solve those problems. Past, present, and future. And by the way, I always say if you're not here with your spouse, go home and say, honey, I've got an exercise for you, and write down your 3 most important goals in life right now. Give them a piece of paper. And then when they write them down, take and compare your 3 goals with honey's 3 goals, and be prepared for a long conversation. You're going to have a lot of fun. Okay, next exercise is what 5 things do you value most in life? Family, love, health, freedom, creativity, courage. What five things do you value the most in life? You have a little bit more time. You have a minute to write these answers. Okay, please stop. This is a very important question because of this question of clarity. Remember we started off talking about the self-ideal. Well, these values are really the core of your self-ideal. These are the core of what you really value, admire, care about more than anything else. And it's only when you're living consistent with your highest values that you feel truly happy. And the difference between successful, happy people and unsuccessful, unhappy people is successful, happy people have clear values. They know what's important to them. And they know what's important to them in order. For example, my highest value has always been my family. No matter how hard I work, I never have budged from that. My family always takes precedence over everything else. There's never even a question. No finance, no work, no travel, no anything else. And when you're absolutely clear about what your values are and in order, then it's easy to make decisions because that's what's right or wrong for you. And each person can have their own values as long as they are your true values. Now, how do you tell what your true values are? We could spend a whole afternoon on this, but what do we tell who are true values? Well, how do we tell our true values? Well, the answer, it is only by what you do under pressure. You can always tell what your values truly are by what you do under pressure. When you have to make a choice between one or another, you always choose what is most valuable to you. You always choose what is most important to you. So you can think about when I was under pressure, what did I do? Did I stay at the office all night and miss my child's graduation or football game or recital? Well, then what I proved to myself under pressure was that my job is more important than my family. So you can always tell when you're forced to choose what your values are. And sometimes by just simply changing your values and saying, no, from now on, I will always make this choice, you become a different person. You become a different person. And when you live consistent with your values, your self-esteem goes up, your self-confidence goes up, your self-image improves, you feel happier, more positive about yourself. A good friend of mine once said that all problems in life can be solved by a return to your values, by going back to what was true for you. The greatest of all human values, of course, is integrity. But what I've learned about integrity is the overarching arching value that guarantees all the others. Integrity means that you live consistent with all your other values. Is you always tell the truth, you always live in truth, you always speak the truth, and whenever you deviate from your own personal integrity, you'll always feel uncomfortable, frustrated, angry, and so on. So when you go back to the main value in living in truth, for you, you start to feel happy again, and everything starts to flow. So here's the third question, is what would you do, how would you spend your time if you learned today that you only had 6 months left to live? Imagine the doctor came to you with the final assessment and said, you're going to enjoy fabulous health for 180 days, and on the 181st day, because of a terminal illness, you'll drop stone dead. What would you do in your last 5 or 6 months? What would you spend your time on if you only had 6 months left to live? Now this is another values question. This question asks you what is really important to you in life. And you know the old joke is nobody in answering that question would write down, I'd like to spend more time at the office. When you answer this question, there's not a single material goal that appears. No money, no cars, no homes, nothing. When you write the answer to this question, they all have to do with your relationships and with your spiritual development. They have to do with the people that you care about and care about the most. And so it's really important that you be clear that if you only had 6 months to live, what would you do? And I ask these questions of myself all the time, and then I just make sure that I'm living my life in harmony with what my answers are. I'm not going to take a chance of a plane flying into a mountain and saying, darn, I wish I'd known this was going to happen so I could have spent my time differently. So it's really important. And then integrity requires that you live consistent with what you would do if you only had 6 months left to live. And this brings us to question number 4, is imagine you won $20 million tax-free, and at the same time you found that you only had 10 years left to live. This is a great question that comes from Stanford University, by the way, is what would you change or do differently for your last 10 years? Let's say you had to work at something. You couldn't just go and sit and loll around. You had to be busy at something. How would you spend your last 10 years? If you had $20 million. Go ahead, write the first 3 things you can think of. Now here's the point, is this question simply asks, is what would you do if you had no fear of failure at all? If you had all the money you needed, so you had no fear of failure at all, you could do anything you want. Many people will write down, I'd quit my job so fast they wouldn't even see me leaving. I mean, and what that means is that you're in the wrong job. If you would quit your current job if you had enough money, which many people would do, it means that you're actually wasting your life. As you're actually stuck in there, and you're probably stuck in there because you don't have enough financial reserves. And so you're caught in a bind, if you're caught in a vice, doing something you dislike because you can't afford to leave it. So when you ask this question, it'll tell you what you really should be doing with your life. You'd start a business, you'd run for public office, you would travel, you'd do things for your family. What would you do if you had $20 million? And that will tell you what you would do if you had no fear of failure at all. It's a great question to ask. And whatever you would do as an answer to this is possible for you. It may not be possible tomorrow, but it's possible for you sooner or later. So what you do is you say, well, this is what I would really like to do. If I had all the money I needed, this is what I'd like to do. Now, how can you begin adjusting your life so you do that? People often say, well, I want to start my own business, so I wouldn't have to be answerable to anybody. But I don't have enough money. Well, nobody has any money. There's 1,001 businesses you can start for less than $100. There's a book on the book stands. Go and buy the book. 1,001 businesses you can start for less than $100. You can start a business out of your home with a computer. You can start it with going to scrap meets. You can start it with services. You can start it with what you cannot imagine. So don't say I don't have any money. If you don't have $100, well, okay. So number 5, what have you always wanted to do but been afraid to attempt? What have you always wanted to do but been afraid to attempt? You've admired other people who've done it. You've looked up to other people who've done it. You wished you could do that sort of a thing. Bungee jumping, deep sea diving, starting a business, running for office, writing a book, getting it published, becoming a public speaker, becoming a singer. What have you always wanted to do but been afraid to try it? Now, what this question asks you is, what are the things that you would do if you had no fear? If you had no fear at all, And so we actually take you to the final question, which is, the sixth question. Let me go back. I don't want to get ahead of myself here. What have you always wanted to do but been afraid to attempt? It's very often, the answer to that is what you've been put on this earth to do. This is your high purpose, is something you've always wanted to do, but you're afraid, what if I fail? What if it doesn't work? And it's absolutely amazing. It's sort of like kicking off in skiing. You know, you get to the top and there's that long, long slope and you finally just push off. And once you push off, you start to move, but the pushing off is the hardest thing of all. I've always found that the key to success is to take the first step. And the greatest reason for failure is people have 1,000 reasons not to take the first step. Comfort zone, learned helplessness, fear of failure, fear of loss, is they won't take the first step. Everything follows from the first step. And the wonderful thing is once you've set a goal, you can always see the first step. You can always see the first step. And the wonderful thing is if you take the first step, you'll see far enough, take one step further. You can always see one step ahead in your life. But the critical thing is taking the first step. When you take the first step, three things happen. First of all, your self-confidence goes up when you take the first step. Second of all, you get feedback, which enables you to self-correct if you made a misstep. And third of all, you actually have more creative ideas on how to achieve the goal. It's almost like it triggers three things: switch, 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 bang, 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 self-confidence, feedback, and ideas. All happen simultaneously for the first step. That's why you'll find that action orientation is a key quality of successful people, is they decide something they want and they act. And in acting, everything starts to work for them. Now the next question is, what sort of activities or experiences in life give you the greatest joy and feeling of importance? The greatest joy and feeling of importance. These are what Maslow called your peak experiences. What are your peak experiences in life? What have you done in the past that makes you really feel wonderful, makes you happy inside, gives you a sense of joy, gives you a sense of pleasure? This sort of peak experience, what are they? And probably they'll fall into three categories: things you do with your family, things you do for your physical health and well-being, things you do in your work where you're really successful and accomplished, and also things that you do in your private life, sports, skiing, ballooning, all kinds of things that give you a tremendous sense of excitement and joy. What are they? Now, whatever your answer to this question is what you should be organizing your life so you're doing more of it. It's an interesting thing. We did an exercise in our coaching program where we had the tables ask, what would you do if you had unlimited funds, if you had all the money in the world, $20 million and so on? And so they all discussed it and they all wrote it on flip charts next to the table. And we were quite astonished when we did this exercise because we found that almost everything they wrote down didn't cost any money. If they had all the money in the world, it didn't cost any money. It was spend more time with my family, exercise more, travel, do more spiritual reading, write poetry, write a book, paint a picture, go for walks. I mean, almost everything people would do if they had unlimited funds don't cost any money. It just frees them from the financial worries that they had. Whatever you wrote as an answer to this is what you should be doing more of in your life. Just like you should be gearing your life around this because these are the source of life's greatest happiness and greatest pleasure. And you need to structure your life so you're doing more of them. Remember I said before that quality time with members of your family is a function of quantity time. So what people will often write down in the three goals, I spend more time with my family, spend more time with my spouse, spend more time with my kids. Because the more time you spend, the more you'll have those moments, which are the great, pleasurable, happy moments of your life that you remember forever. And this is the last question. What one great thing would you dare to dream if you knew you could not fail? If you could wave a magic wand and you could achieve any goal, short-term or long-term, big or small, what one goal would you set for yourself if you're absolutely guaranteed a success? What would it be? Now I have some good news for you. And the good news is that whatever you wrote down as an answer to that question is possible for you. Is you have the ability within yourself or outside of yourself, within your resources or within your contacts or somewhere, you have the ability to achieve that goal. Because you cannot write down a goal in answer to that question without simultaneously having the ability to achieve it. So the only real question is, how badly do you want it? How badly do you want it? And are you willing to do whatever is necessary and to make whatever sacrifices are necessary to achieve it? And that is the great question. The great question is, am I willing to actually put in the effort, to put in the weeks, months, years? Am I willing to learn the subjects, risk the mistakes, risk the failures, rejection, everything else to do it? That's the great question. Because if you could write it down, it means it is possible for you. It is achievable for you. I have never written down a goal like this that I have not achieved. Some of them took me years to achieve, but I've never written down a goal that somehow 1,000 things will happen that are outside your imagination right now that will make your goal possible. But the starting point is for you to decide what it is. It's like deciding what your destination is for a long journey and be clear about the destination. You may have to take many detours and deviations along the way, but you will eventually reach that goal. We're going to take a break now, and then we're going to come back and we're going to complete the next part of the exercise. But before we do, I want to tell you just a very simple story by Socrates, about Socrates. Once upon a time, a traveler was walking the roads of ancient Greece, and he came across an old man sitting on a rock, and he asked the old man, he said, I'm lost. I'm trying to get to Mount Olympus. He said, can you help me get to Mount Olympus? He said, yes, he said, I'll tell you the way. He said, but if you really want to get to Mount Olympus, then just make sure that every step you take is in that direction. The old man turned out to be Socrates with a typical Socratic answer. If you really want to achieve anything in life, just make sure that every step you take is in that direction and not in 100 other directions at once. So how's everybody doing this morning? Great. Good. Now we're moving on. This is even more important. This is the most important exercise that we're going to do the next couple of minutes, next few minutes. So we say, you're going to make a list. You see the page there. You're going to make a list of 10 goals that you'd like to achieve in the next year or so. And these can be goals that you want to achieve by the end of the month or by the end of the year. If you want to, you can write longer-term goals, but try to keep it, about a year, because one-year goals tend to be the most motivational because you can actually see them. They're not that far away. The closer the goal is, the fewer the number of steps, the more motivated you are to start. And so one-year goals seem to be the best. So what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to write down 10 goals and write them as affirmations. I earn this amount of money by this date. I achieve this weight by this date. I drive this car by this date. And always just write a by. It's sort of like a use-by date when you buy food in the supermarket. That by date tells your subconscious mind that you have a specific time that you want the goal. And, okay, so that's what we'll do now. Please begin. Write down 10 goals. Okay. Please stop. Now, if all you did in your life was to write down your 10 goals and then take that page and fold it up and put it away somewhere where you wouldn't see it for an entire year, like perhaps in the pages of your Bible, someplace you would never look. At the end of the year, you would take it out, and it would be as though a magic trick has been done. Abracadabra, abracadoo, poof. And when you opened up your list, you'll be both happy and sad. You'll be happy because 8 of your 10 goals will have been accomplished in the most remarkable ways, in ways that you cannot imagine today. The number of coincidences would be beyond belief. And you'll be sad because you wish you had set more goals and bigger goals. Now, does this work? Yes. Does it work all the time? Yes. Does it work all over the world? Yes. I've taught it in 56 countries. And does it work? People come up to me, and they always use these words, which you will use in time. And the words are, you won't believe what's happened to me. You won't believe what's happened to me. I'm like in a wedding receiving line when I do a seminar in Kiev after I've been there a year or two before, or in Berlin, or in Atlanta. People line up, and they say, Mr. Tracy, you won't believe what's happened to me. Mr. Tracy, you won't believe what's happened to me. You won't believe what's happened to me. It's the most amazing thing, and I will believe it, because some of the things that have happened are so astonishing that people just wrote down 10 goals. They could not believe it. One gentleman came up to me and said, in Vancouver, he said, I wrote that exercise down, but I only accomplished 2 of the goals of the 10 in a year. He said, then I went over there. I said, what a lousy method this is. And I went over it. And I realized that the 2 were, the 80-20 rule, worth more than all the others put together. I said, and would make all the others possible in a short period of time. He said, it's an incredible thing. So all it requires is that you write it down. Now, once you've done this, that is not the end, because now we are going to plus this process. We say, so what you're going to do is you're going to review your list of 10 goals and look over these goals and then ask what one goal, if you could achieve it within 24 hours, would have the greatest positive impact on your life. So imagine that we could wave a magic wand and you could have any one of the goals that you wrote down for the next year, but you could have it within 24 hours. Which one goal would you select? And whatever it is, circle that goal. Which is the one goal if it would have the greatest positive impact on your life? Now, usually it's a financial goal. Sometimes it's a health goal. Sometimes it's a business goal or a relationship or family goal. But which one goal would have the greatest positive impact on your life if you could achieve it? And just circle that goal. Now, this goal becomes your major definite purpose. This becomes the central organizing point of your life for the foreseeable future. And it's very easy. Once you have decided upon this, then this is it. Now, it may change over time, but this is the one for you. So now what we're going to do is turn to the next page, and you're going to set a deadline on this goal. Remember, whatever you circle is possible for you to achieve, and sometimes far faster than you realize. Sometimes far faster than you realize, but the starting point is to decide what it is in the first place, and then to write it down as you have done. And then what you do is you set a deadline. When do you want to achieve it? By this date. And then, third of all, you make it measurable. How will you measure that this goal has been accomplished? Well, you will have the money in your account. You will weigh a certain amount on the scale. Your business volume will be a certain size. But always put a number on a goal because your subconscious mind needs a number. So set a deadline, make it measurable, and then we're going to go through this exercise and list the 3 biggest obstacles that are holding you back from achieving this goal. Now, the next question is, what additional knowledge and skill will you need to achieve your goal? If you could wave a magic wand and be excellent in 3 areas, is which areas of knowledge and skill? If you could do 3 things really, really well, what 3 things would help you the most to achieve that goal? Write them down. Remember, they're just skills. Whatever you write down is a learnable skill. Next question is, whose help, cooperation, and assistance will you need to achieve the goal? Nobody can achieve anything by themselves. I have a good friend whose central focus in his whole business life to achieve his goals is to find a chief operating officer who can run the details of his business. And he's been working on that for 5 years. Still has not been able to find one. And that's the key thing that is holding his business back from realizing its full potential, is finding that one key person. Sometimes it's finding a source of finance, finding a lender or an angel investor or a banker that will finance you. My friend Harvey McKay needed to expand his envelope company, and he drew a circle around his business of 5 miles, and he went to every bank within 5 miles of his company, and they all said no. Then he drew a circle of 10 miles, and he went to every bank within 10 miles, and then a circle within 15 miles. They all said no, until finally he'd exhausted Minneapolis-St. Paul, and so he drove a circle of 150 miles, which took in Milwaukee, and he began to go to every bank in Milwaukee. He finally found one bank that would lend him $75 million to expand his business. And it turned out to be exactly the right time. It was a fabulous investment. The bank got all their money back. It made him rich. He said, I would have gone to 500 miles if necessary. I would just not stop going to banks until I found one that would finance me, because I knew that was the key to the future of my business. So sometimes you have to say, whose cooperation do you need? And as long as you don't care if they say no, then you just keep asking people. And it's quite astonishing what will happen. So whose cooperation and assistance will you need? You may need the assistance of your family at home. You may need the assistance of your boss. You may need the assistance of your partners and so on. So who are those people whose help you will need? And then one of the great questions you always have to ask is, what will you do for them to get their cooperation and assistance? What's in it for them? What's their benefit? And people only do things for their own reasons. So before you approach anybody, you should have thought through in advance how this will be a benefit to them, as well as being a benefit to you, and start off from that point of view. appeal to their selfish interests in a very positive way. How will this be beneficial for you to help me to achieve my goal? And of course, if you approach an investor, the benefit to the investor will be very high return on the investment. If you're asking someone to work for you at a low salary but a high payoff at the end, well, that's the benefit. Many companies start off where they can't pay very much, but they offer substantial shares of the profits if the business is successful, and they can often attract very good people who work very hard in exchange for that possible outcome on the upside. Now, the next list is take a list and write 7 things that you could do immediately based on your answers to the previous questions to achieve your major definite purpose. What's 7 steps? What 7 actions could you take immediately? Remember, action orientation is everything. Once upon a time, I was asked by my boss to investigate the importation of Suzuki vehicles into Canada. I had never imported a vehicle in my life, although I had driven 4-wheel drive vehicles. So I began interviewing people and talking to people who were in the business of importing vehicles, and I found a man who was in charge of Hyundai of Canada. And his name was George. He was a very nice guy. He was very eager to help. He said that he had been retained by Hyundai as a consultant about 3 or 4 years ago and asked to put together a program for importing Hyundai vehicles, setting up distribution, setting up dealerships, setting up parts, everything. So he did a lot of investigation. He put together a complete plan, and he submitted it to Hyundai, and as a result, they not only they did not go through him, they worked through a person with a lot of money, and that person hired him as the president of Hyundai of Canada because he had the plan, and he knew how to start moving on day one. So I said, whatever happened to that plan for importing vehicles from the Orient? And he said, well, it's right here. And he pulled out a sheet, and the sheet had 42 steps on it. And it's 42 steps, and it was first do this, second do this. It was in order, in sequence. This was the result of his 2 or 3 years of work. And this was a sequence. I said, can I have a copy of that? And he said, oh, sure. He gave me a copy of it. I took that around like a checklist for importing Suzuki vehicles. One is sign the contract. Second is set up the bank accounts. Third is arrange for the first order. Fourth is arrange for the trans-shipping from the port. Fifth is arrange for the trucking company. Sixth is arrange for insurance. Seventh is appoint the dealerships. Eighth is set up the parts distribution. It was just literally a checklist. And I went around for 3 months with that checklist, and I did everything that was on the checklist. I did not deviate from the checklist. And by the time I hit number 42, the first 50 vehicles rolled off the ship from Japan and rolled out to the first dealerships that we had set up. Within the next 2 years, I sold $25 million worth of vehicles through 65 dealerships. And the Japanese were asked privately about me, and they said, this man knows nothing about our business, but he did everything exactly right. We have never seen a smoother rollout of national distribution in our history. And they're in about 120 countries, a lot of third world countries. And what I did is I had the checklist. And it makes you look like a genius, and you just follow your checklist. It's like a recipe. So there's the 20-80 rule that I teach in time management. The first 20% of time that you spend planning and organizing the steps will be worth 80% of the value of everything in accomplishing the goal. Sometimes it's the 90-10 rule. Sometimes it's the first 10% that you spend thinking through your plan and organizing the steps that's worth 90% when it comes to actually implementing the plan. I cannot tell you how important this is. All successful people think on what? They think on paper. And they think on paper. All their expressions are on paper. They think with a pencil and a pen in their hand. And they keep writing and rewriting and rewriting. So really important. Now the next step is I want you to write down the set priorities. What's the number one most important action you can take immediately to achieve your most important goal? And then number one, look over this list of 7 steps. If you could only do one thing and do it now and do it completely, which would be the most helpful in getting you started? And then ask the question again, what would be number 2? What would be number 3? Please write them down. Last question, and this is really the key question of all. What one action are you going to take immediately to achieve your most important goal? And write it down in the present tense. I earn, I achieve, I commence, I begin, I do, whatever it happens to be, but write it as an action statement as opposed to a dangling statement like, start marketing. That's not an action. It's impossible for a child to understand and to evaluate if you've done it. So write it down very clearly and specifically so a child could take it and do it, or someone else could take it and do it. Now what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to turn to the person next to you and tell them the one action that you are going to take to achieve the one goal that can have the greatest positive impact on your life. Just turn to the person next to you, pair up, and tell them the answer to that final question. Okay, if I could have your attention, please. I have to congratulate you. What you've done is quite remarkable, and what you've done is only what the top 3% of people in the world have ever done. Is not only have you thought through all of these critical factors on goals, but you've written your goals, you've written 10, and you've selected number 1. That actually moves you from the 3% into the top 1% of people in the world today, top 1% of adults, because now you know what your major definite purpose is, and you've actually created a plan to achieve it. The only thing that counts now is will you follow through. The follow through, as they say, is a bitch. It's very easy, but you always know the first step. You have determined the first step. And so therefore, no matter how big the goal is, always take the first step. The difference between success and failure is successful people take the first step. And that's what starts everything. It's like starting the engine, boom, and things start to move. And you start to get feedback, and you start to have ideas, and you start to have more confidence. But take the first step, and take the first step as fast as you can.